we have the Worldwide General Manager for Education for Microsoft, Mark East. So maybe if I call you a data king, or certainly an element of what Mark has to say of the importance of data, as well as the overall impact of ICTs for education. Please give Mark a warm welcome, please.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be back in Africa. I've been a lifelong friend of Africa, I like to think. I spent my honeymoon here in Zimbabwe, interestingly. I think I've got to point my clicker over here, yeah. And I'm actually doing some various projects. Have we got anyone from Kenya in the audience? Can I see a show of hands? Anyone from Kenya? A few people? So on the left here is a school that I personally built on Fangano Island in Lake Victoria, in a mortar village. There's a picture of me here with the head teacher. Obviously, I was a bit younger in those days. And then the other project I'm currently working on is in Uganda. Anyone here in Uganda? A few people? This is in Bwindi. And we're building I'm working with this guy called Joshua in the middle here, and we're building a guerrilla education center for everyone to come along. So we brought some land and we're building it right now. This gorilla on the top right here, by the way, is the sort of a dominant silverback. And interestingly, his name's Mark II, but they didn't name him after me, I hear. But anyway. So here I'm here really to talk about Microsoft, and this is like an obligatory slide that I have to use all the time whenever I do presentations, but I don't really want to talk too much about it. I think the important thing here is that all of the big transformation that's coming is going to be factored around two key things, and that's really connectivity. Okay, if you look at all of the different icons on the thing, it's all about connectivity, getting connected, and also importantly, data. How you're managing data, and data is really all about artificial intelligence. So, we are in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution. And in fact, if any of you want to read a little bit more about this, there's a book. You won't see the author, but his name's Klaus Schwab. So if you want to go and buy this book, it's very interesting. And the summary of the book is it says that we now are in this fourth industrial revolution where the most important thing is artificial intelligence and robotics. And that's going to change a lot of the jobs that we're going to see in the world in the future. In fact, students going into school today, going into elementary school, who may have a view of a career choice, the chances are that career may not exist by the time they finish their education in higher education. Okay, so that's how quickly things are changing, and it's really all being driven by technology. So in Africa, we know there is a huge potential. We have a huge number of natural resources, human capital inside Africa, and there is a huge opportunity for technology skills and jobs that are coming. And in technology, if you have connectivity, the chances are you don't need to move out of the country. You can actually do the jobs inside your country, even if it's a global role or you're working for a company in a different country. I'm going a little bit quicker so we can make up some time. And there is this big, huge skills shortage in Africa. And if you have a skills shortage and a higher unemployment rate, then the chances are your GDP will be impacted. So what you need to do is think about where are the new jobs coming from and make sure that your students in schools are being trained and prepared for the new work of the future, the new employment of the future, to try and improve your GDP. And as you improve your GDP, you'll be able to invest more in education. So one of the key things is really STEM. We have to make sure that we start to train students, to educate students with STEM in schools. Today, more than 50% of jobs require technology skills. In the future, in less than 10 years, it's going to become 77%. And in fact, our CEO, Satya Nadella, says that in the future, everybody will need to learn to code. Everybody. There needs to be some element of understanding coding as we go through. And also, girls. If you're actually teaching STEM to girls, the chances are that they will go on to higher education goes to 150% chance. So if we can try and make sure that we're teaching STEM skills in schools, there's a greater chance that girls will then go on and do higher education. Now, often I go around, and this is a common thing that happens in conferences. People say this typical thing. They say, look, if you're a surgeon from 100 years ago, and you're placed in an operating theater of today, you will be completely lost. You wouldn't know what to do. But if you're an educator of 100 years ago and you're placed in a classroom today, you'd feel completely at home. And the point is that nothing really has changed. And I've been thinking about that, and I say, well, of course, with health, it's a question of life and death. You know, you really have to use the latest technology, otherwise you're going to die, and no one really wants to die, so we have to do that. But then with education, certainly when you get to your older years, like myself, you reflect back and you say, I wonder if I've really reached my potential. I wonder if I could have done something different. I wonder if the education system that taught me really did the best job for me. And as you get older, of course, there's no chance to turn back that clock and change again. And the point I think I'm really making is that it's the responsibility of governments to make sure that we do drive this change. And I'd like you all to think about technology in schools as arteries and veins, using the healthcare analogy. Technology should be the lifeblood of institutions going forward. And it's all to do with if the heart was the control factor, that's the cloud, and how we actually use data to actually educate and improve learning outcomes for students. So people talk a lot about digital transformation. You know, they're saying when digital transformation happens, it's coming, we need to do it, but the chances are that really it's already happened. And certainly all around the world, there are schools like Miami-Dade, for example, that are using technology very, very effectively and efficiently in teaching and learning of their students. So it's already happened. There's no point waiting anymore. We have to have a different mindset and think about how we can start applying it now in any degree to improve learning outcomes for students. Now, in many different countries around the world, we have this new student, we call them fidgetals. And they are students that really don't differentiate between the digital world and the physical world. They understand technology, they've grown up with it. In fact, many of the students that I've spoken to here in Zimbabwe, they understand smartphone technology, they see it, they use it, and when they go to school, they're expecting a better degree of digital support in their education, and they don't often find it. So these students expect to use technology. Learning has certainly changed. If I was to ask a student in my country, in the UK, tell me the value of technology in learning outcomes, the first thing they'll probably do is go to their computer and select a browser and search and get the information. Technology is becoming really ingrained in the way that many schools now use it, and certainly teachers are using it. And the modern workplace has changed. In fact, in many businesses today, the majority of them all use technology. In fact, I was talking to someone in Australia recently about the mining. And the fact that many of the vehicles now that go to collect all of the iron ore and the gold, etc., they're all digitized. There's no drivers. They're driverless trucks. They just go and collect it and bring it all back. Everything's computerized. They have a dashboard. They know exactly where things are going. So it's just the world is moving, the world is changing, and it's changing very, very quickly. So what is changing those? What is the driving force of really all this change? We believe there are three main things: mixed reality, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing. I'm going to talk a lot more about artificial intelligence, but just briefly on mixed reality to start. This is an example of a technology from Microsoft called HoloLens. It's basically where you can augment education and learning through a virtual reality headset. And here you see students from Case Western University who are using HoloLens to look at the anatomy of the human skeleton. And they're looking at bone fractures, actually, to figure out where, in the medical school, how they can use different techniques to heal bones to fix them quicker. Okay? So here's an example of where technology really can try and bring learning to life. And there are many other examples of virtual reality, but here's just one I wanted to show you, so you can see some of the impact. Now, artificial intelligence. Well, artificial intelligence really all begins with data. You have to have the data. You have to have access to the data. Now, there are various ways that you collect data. Typically, in many African countries, this is a typical scenario. The data is collected manually, and it needs to be input digitally. And once you have the data, what you really want to do is display it in some meaningful way. You know, you need to have some dashboard. I think Miami-Dade was talking about how Alberto was talking about how he actually have a dashboard where he can actually see the data, what the data represents, and they then use that. And the next stage is, well, you want to predict the outcomes from that data. You want to know if a student's going to fail, and you want to know if the student will fail well before the examination, because you want to be able to intervene in that student's education and change something. You can actually review the quality of the teacher. You can maybe analyze, in Australia, they're analyzing whether students are happy. They go into the classroom in Western Australia, Catholic education, they go into the classroom and they can use a little icon to say a smiley face, sad face, and they just do it themselves in every lesson, and then they review that data, and they can see, well, this student is unhappy in this lesson, or this student's unhappy in all lessons, so maybe there's a problem at home. So they can start analyzing that. So predicting the outcomes, looking at the data, and having an intelligence is important. Now, in the cloud, you can use technology such as in Microsoft, we call it machine learning. In some ways, the computer system will tell you the answers to questions you haven't even thought about. They're going to tell you information that you hadn't even thought about asking because they can see it. And we believe that if you can do that properly, as with Miami-Dade, you can then start to drive better performance and better learning outcomes by using that data. Now, many people talk about artificial intelligence. I prefer to say it's really augmented intelligence. That's what we're trying to do with AI. AI stands for augmented intelligence, to support us all in what we do. Now, I want to give you an example. This is a group, this is a trust called the Snow Leopard Trust in Asia. And they came to Microsoft and they wanted help in their research. So what they do is they set up these cameras. Oh, well, the population of snow leopards is 5,000, and it's diminishing very, very quickly. So they're trying to protect and understand the habitat and how snow leopards work and live. So here they are, they're setting up cameras, and the goal of it is to try to take pictures of snow leopards. And they're doing it, obviously, by using cameras and motion detector devices. So here's a snow leopard. This is a picture of a snow leopard. They've seen the cameras pick them up. And there's another one. You can just see the tail going by. Is that a snow leopard? No, obviously not. Can you see a snow leopard in this picture? Anyone? No? Okay. No snow leopard there. Is there a snow leopard here? No? Oh, hang on a second. There is one, just there, just at the bottom of the picture. Snow leopard here. Can't really see it. Snow leopard here. You can just, I think, see the tail going through. Is there a snow leopard here? Anyone see the snow leopard? Hands up. Okay, you can just see it. You're right. It's right here. Snow leopard here. Hands up if you can see the snow leopard. Some at the back can. It's actually right in the middle of the picture. Right there. Now you can imagine this system's going to take many, many different photographs. And what they're doing on the photograph is, if you do it manually, you're going to have to look at every single photograph. You're going to have to figure out, well, is that snow leopard the same as a snow leopard that was here last time round? How big is a snow leopard? Is that snow leopard growing? And you can pick up lots and lots of information, but you're looking at, hundreds of thousands of different images that you really need computing to analyze, because it can do it very, very quickly and very, very effectively. Really hundreds of thousands of photographs. So I wanted to use this analogy just to try to help you understand what AI is. Now let's just take it now into an education context. So which student is at greater risk? We can collect the data from their performance in the classroom. We can analyze it, and if you're a teacher, of course, you would have every student's data that you can look at. If you were maybe a superintendent, you would have a lot more students to look at, and you were really trying to find trends to see what's happening here. Maybe there's a curriculum problem. Maybe there's something else. And if you're a Ministry of Education, you're going to want to see all of this information. There's a lot of it, right? So you really want technology to really help you get to a point where you can say, well, there are some key factors here that we need to improve or change to improve the learning outcomes of students. Now, we do a lot of work in education, and especially with artificial intelligence. And this is something we're doing with the ocean, in the oceans. AI for Earth, it's called. It's an innovation. And we're trying to learn about all of the changes in the oceans. And of course, AI plays a really major part in that. And effectively, we can use AI to really help us with changes in climate change, understanding that. We can maybe improve things to help with climate change, food production, maybe even things such as antibiotic resistance that we can actually then use AI effectively to help us. So let's go on to quantum computing, because this is the next stage. And Microsoft have announced recently that we're building a quantum computer. So what is really quantum computing? Well, we're quite limited even today. If you go in stages, I'm saying to you that we really need to have a cloud solution for managing data. So all of your data can be collected digitally, and you can analyze it, and you can report on it, and you can act on it. But with quantum computing, today's cloud solutions and even our data centers around the world are not powerful enough to analyze all of the data that there is. So we need a really supercomputer to build. We need to build a supercomputer to analyze all of that data. And I suspect there are answers to many of the world's problems in the data that exists today, but because we haven't been able to analyze all of the data, it doesn't give us the information we need. But with quantum computing, this new technology, which will create a computer which is bigger and better than all of our data centers combined, we will then be able to start getting answers to questions. So at the end of the day, really, when you look at digital transformation of education, it's a bit like an iceberg, where you only see, the key thing is the outcomes, which is really what you see as the top of the iceberg, but underneath is a lot more work that everyone has to do in terms of digital transformation. There's an awful lot of work that has to happen to make that work properly. So I think at the end of the day, it's really about mindset change. We have to have a different mindset in terms of how we're focusing on education in our schools. You don't need to have and say we need to have a cloud solution. We can't do anything unless we have the internet. It would be better if you had an internet connection, but you can do things to help learning outcomes just with technology in some form inside the school. So these are really the 4 priorities that I think, certainly in Africa, we need to prioritize. Number 1, you need to try to make sure your schools are connected. There's so much content and information available. I mean, there's a new product that's just coming out. I saw it the other day, which is a digital platform for teacher training called Lengo. So teachers will be able to view a 15-minute clip on any type of teacher training they want. It's not just about technology training, it's anything. So you can distribute teacher training through the computers themselves, the technology themselves to teach teachers, but it comes from the cloud. So cloud is important, connectivity to the internet is important. If you're spending a lot of money on books, why not digitize them? Have all of the books inside the computers. In Egypt recently, they've now decided that all of their books are going to be electronic, and they have an agreement with one of our partners to make sure that they have access into the standard Office tools so they can read the content easily with inside the tools they're familiar with. Personal computing. A lot of the countries around in Africa are looking at getting devices one-to-one, device to their students. So they will give a single device to a single student. And this is great, we love that, but you have to be very, very careful what computer you decide. You don't necessarily get the cheapest device, sub-$100 devices. They don't last particularly long. The security systems on them aren't very good. They're open privacy and security problems for the students all the time. So you need to be thinking about it. We say the best device is where you have a device that supports pen technology. They tend to be more expensive. So you have to then fall back on what you can afford, but don't go to the bottom and just say, here is a device, we give it to the student, and now we're done. We've done that. Digital transformation has happened, because it doesn't work that way. I said command of English. I accept everything that was said by Alberto about being able to support local languages, but the real key thing is that the international language is English, and all students really should try to learn English. Because in the new world of digital transformation, although you'll be able to get to a situation where the computers will automatically translate, and we have that today, by the way, but it's better if they can understand English. So how do we do that is an interesting one. And then finally, STEM, as I've already mentioned. Even if you were just going to focus on STEM, you would see outcomes in the next 10 years with your students, for sure. So here are some partners we work with for connectivity. We use an organization called Good Networks. They work with all the telcos, and the interesting thing about Good Networks is that they use something called TV white spaces. So in the early days, when televisions were invented, there were spaces that were left between the spectrum to make sure that there was no interference between channels. But technology's got so good now that we don't need to leave those spaces, and we can use those spaces for internet connectivity. In fact, in Kenya, we have a solution running where you can actually link from a core backbone telco solution and then travel with TV white space masks for 50 kilometers. So if you have rural schools and it's difficult getting them connected, this solution would definitely help. And it gives you very good bandwidth, certainly enough to be using in the classroom for teaching. Here are devices that have been given out in Kenya schools, again, for their students, and these are powerful devices. They're not the lowest cost devices, they're competitive, but they run all of the reasonable software that you need to use in classrooms. So again, be careful what you decide on for technology, and certainly come to Microsoft and we can help give you the specifications that we would recommend. This is another company called LanguageNut. They're a British company, and they provide language training software. So if you want to help with English skills, or in fact you want to teach from any language, they pretty much do any language, and they're even interested in developing for local language here in Africa, you can speak with them and they will develop the solution for you. And therefore, the technology itself will help the children learn the languages. And they have primary solutions and they have secondary solutions. Okay, so that you can use language. There's a technology solution for teaching languages. And then the other thing is STEM. And I always think the best way to learn coding is through games. And I know in the past, certainly when I was at school, you weren't allowed to play with anything in your lessons. But we encourage students to be playing to learn. And Minecraft enables you to do that. There's an education edition of Minecraft. You can use Minecraft in your schools. Certainly from 7-year-old to 14-year-old, Minecraft is being used extensively by all students outside of the school. Now we can use it inside, and we can help them to teach them to code. And in fact, Microsoft actually provide lots of different options for coding. Minecraft is one. There's also MakeCode, so that the students can use MakeCode. And these little MakeCode kits are very inexpensive, $20 US for a MakeCode kit for the classroom. Hacking STEM, mixed reality, we provide programs for all of these different things for schools that you can take access to, of. Now, we work with key partners all around the world. You can see some of the names of them there. But I really just wanted to talk about one, which is Sphero. You can see bottom left, a little logo. And what they do is they make robots. And this is a case of robots. So a school can take the case. This is a charging case, so these robots charge up very, very quickly. And they have about 3 hours of life before they need to be recharged. And the students basically will code to make these robots do things. Very inexpensive. These robots are less than $50 each. But you can then use them in the classroom, and you know, there's nothing better to see a child learning to code and seeing what they're doing immediately responsive to what they're coding. And if you're in higher education, something which is going to help with certainly employability is all of the courses that we currently offer. A lot of this courseware is all free. So you can integrate it into your degree courses, and then the students can then go and take a certificate. They have to pay for the certificate. But if you want them to be a data scientist in universities, or you want them to be an IT support technician, or even an expert in artificial intelligence, all of this courseware is now all available online in the cloud. And you can either go online to use it, or you can take the content and host it yourself in your own university, if you wanted to. So all of this we're building to try to help the move and the change to improve skills for students. Now, just towards finishing off now, this is something a lot of governments say to us, well, okay, you come along, you give these presentations, but how can you really help us? What can you leave us with that will really help us? And we have something called the Education Transformation Framework from Microsoft. It's focused around these core things: leadership and policy, modern teaching and learning, intelligent environments, technology blueprints. And it's really made up of 16 different components. And you may not be able to read this slide, but we can certainly, anyone in Microsoft can give you this. And it really provides you with the blueprint of all of the things you have to think about if you're looking to drive digital transformation in your school system. So if you can actually, I'll give you one example here. There is professional training of teachers, and there are various programs that we operate to help that, including internship, by the way. So if you have teachers and they want to work with Microsoft for a while, they don't actually work with us. We train them and we send them out to your schools, but they're working within the education division of Microsoft. So we have programs all around each of these areas to help. So there is a blueprint, you can take it. Now, there is a reception. I think we're sponsoring a drinks reception at 6 o'clock today, out in the grounds by the tent. And for government officials representing their ministries, if you come along to that, not only do we give you a drink, we also give you this book called Transforming Education. You can take one of this away, and it really is all of the blueprint that I talked about is all detailed in here, exactly what you have to do, examples from around the world, and how you can actually transform education using that book. So on that note, I believe I'm going to close because of the interest of time, but thank you very much for your attention, and please come and see me during the conference. I'll be happy to talk to you. Questions? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Bayanda Mzoneli from the South African government. I heard you mentioned an important development of digitizing the books. So for ease of access, and I guess it also provides ease of updates with each edition rather than reprinting and the costs associated with that. But you coming from a company that provides proprietary software, how do we get around the issues of copyrights for those books, given that some of them are not always open access? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, luckily you have a partner here at the conference called Cortext, and they're a Microsoft partner, and they have digital rights management in their solution, and they will work with you to digitize your books, and in fact give you access to many other books from around the world, potentially through license if you want them to, and make it available to all of your students. In fact, they're the partner that we're working with in Egypt. So they're here, so you should go and speak with them. They represent, when they provide their books, they represent it very much in a kind of OneNote lookalike. So if you're using OneNote, you'll be very familiar with the output from their technology. Some other interesting things that I didn't mention in my presentation, which we'll be interested in, is where you can actually do what we call the Immersive Reader. So if you have special needs students, or in fact any students, you can use the Immersive Reader inside OneNote, which if you have dyslexic students is an amazing tool because it highlights words automatically. And in fact, we've built that technology now into our Edge browser. So if you're looking at anything on the internet using the Edge browser, you can get the Immersive Reader tool and you can actually use it to help students who struggle with reading if they have dyslexia. Any other questions?
Thank you.
I've got a question regarding the digital transformation and your 4 pillars that you spoke about. Connectivity, how should we be approaching things differently here in Africa from a connectivity point of view?
Well, it's a challenge, and there are various options of connectivity, of course. There's obviously, you can have it hardwired into the school. That's difficult. You're dependent upon your telco organizations to do that. Some people are using satellite, so you can use downlink and uplink. Tends to be expensive, and there are limitations on bandwidth. I think the best solution overall is for you to have a plan of rollout of internet connectivity to your schools with your telco providers, whether they be public or private. And then you work with good networks on the slide I put up here, who will work with them to extend their standard network into rural areas using TV white spaces. It's obviously more challenging if you're in a country with lots of mountains and hills, but certainly if you're in an area of relatively flat plain, then this will work very well, and we have examples of it working in 11 countries in Africa already. So that's how we do it. So there's no easy answer. There are 3 options that you can use. When I was in Namibia, we did a project there where we were using satellite to download data to the schools. And you can have a little area, it only costs $100 US, that will pick up your data from the satellite as it goes over overnight. So if you're a Ministry of Education and you want to distribute information, you can do that really easily by uplinking it yourself, and it then goes to all of your schools. The problem is the uplink tends to be difficult and expensive, and there's limited bandwidth. There we were having the schools send any content back through the postal service to the ministry, who then looked at it, and then if they saw something interesting, they would then share it with all the other schools, for example, by downloading it again. But there's no easy answer, and I really honestly think at the end of the day it's got to be a priority for the ministry, and we can help with them with the last mile of connection.
Thank you very much. Have we got more questions?
Thank you very much, Mark, for that wonderful presentation. I also want to congratulate Microsoft and other companies for obviously working with us in programs to try to do things at universities. I think this is very important. For example, we have academies at the University of Botswana, Computer Science Department, to work with Microsoft and other companies to help upskill students while they are still students, to make them ready for market. We also obviously are very interested in working with companies like yourselves to make sure that we enhance our research capacity. Now, the main issue in Africa, as you know, is resources. The main issue is resources. Question is, how much do we invest in making sure that we capacitate our universities to work on very fantastic projects like the one that you just shown there for information-driven decision-making? Most African countries have got different priorities. We have to look at health, education, agriculture. We are spending less than 1% GDP. And that is the reality. Question is, what type of partnerships can we have with companies like yourselves for longevity, for sustainability, of making sure that we are prepared and we're working forward to make sure that we're doing these things? Also regionally, in SADC, for example, we're working on a SADC cyber infrastructure framework to look at compute platforms, connectivity platforms, the issue of data, and issue of human capital development. SADC itself does not have a budget for funding this project. Member states are also constrained. My proposition is this: how can companies like yourselves come to Africa and have considered long-term strategies for making sure that we get to the place where we want to be, given that we are resource constrained? Thank you very much.
We already give education pricing for our technology for schools and universities, so that's something we do, and in many cases it's up to 90% discount off commercial prices. So we already do that today to many institutions. Now, so leave aside our licensing and our software, what else do we do? We have a team of, I think it's the last time I saw the number is 700 people globally focused on education at Microsoft. 700 people focused on education, including a small development team who do all of the work such as Immersive Reader in Office tools. So we're ready and able to engage with ministries of education, universities, to sit down and talk about how you can do some of these things. So for example, I would say, don't build data centers. No more data centers. If any of you are thinking of building data centers, don't do it. It's going to be a complete waste of funding, because you're always going to come up to limitations on what you can use a data center for. People are going to have higher demands than you can cope with. Just buy the service. And the service costs of the cloud solutions, if you have good internet, are going down and down and down. So do that. Take some of our curriculum that I mentioned on the last slide and integrate it into your degree courses so your students can not only get their degree, but they get vendor certification. If they have a vendor certification, they have a Microsoft vendor certification, employers take more notice. Unfortunately, I'm sorry the message is hard to take, but they do, because it's a high stakes test. So that's one thing I would say. And then generally, we have a great partner network. Many of them are here today, that we can sit down with you and work out how we can best do it. But there's no easy answer. We just have to work with you and consult with you and figure out how to do it. One of the things I'm announcing at the drinks evening later on this evening is the fact that we're launching our blueprint, our digital, the blueprint for digital transformation, where we're offering to engage with all governments across Africa to do this. So that's something you should perhaps come along, have a drink, and have a listen to what we're going to do.
Thank you very much. Yes, a question here.
Hi, my name is Abubakar Kulbali. I'm the CTO of the Ministry of Education of Côte d'Ivoire. Back in 2013, 2012, 2013, we engaged discussion with Microsoft, and when we signed an MOU with Microsoft to implement a lot of the things that you mentioned today. But up to now, we have done nothing has happened. We had really a hard time implementing the MOU that we signed. I don't know, is there, because we even discussed the putting the TV white space application, but it never happened. Is there a better way to engage Microsoft in implementing some of the things that you discussed today?
Well, I'm sure you're not the only one that's experienced some of that, perhaps, but I would say if any of you have experienced that, come and speak to me during this conference. Come and grab me, and I will make sure that we have a proper execution with you.
My name is Professor Tony Anwuka, Minister of State Education, Nigeria. Microsoft has a large market in Nigeria, but what would it take us, my ministry, for instance, to get you step up your involvement in education in Nigeria?
Well, Nigeria is, you've got a huge student population in Nigeria, and for certain we want to be working with you. I know that my team are engaged right now, working with various federal and sort of state governments in Nigeria. But again, let's sit down and talk about it, because we are keen to bring solutions to Nigeria for sure. And in fact, any African country, we have the resources to be able to engage with you. So come and talk to me later. I don't know why there might be a challenge.
My name is Patrick Mugisha. I'm a Commissioner for Innovations and Intellectual Property Management, Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation from Uganda. Thank you for your presentation. I need some insight. I believe technology in any society has the positive side and the negative side. When it comes to teaching, it's unfortunate that in Africa, I don't know the rest, other parts of the world, teachers are like small gods in Africa. That's my view. And technology comes in, chances are it's going to make teachers at some point irrelevant if they don't step up the game and take on and embrace technology in schools and even as individuals. As Microsoft, what do you have to say about that? And second, maybe with academicians in the house today, I'm worried. Do we still need written examinations?
So many people always ask me, slightly different question, but I think it's the same kind of question that you asked, is will technology ever replace teachers? And I'd like to answer it by giving you the answer of an Australian teacher, rather than from me. And this was a school principal in Australia. I was at a conference, he was asked this question, and he said, if technology could replace teachers, then maybe it should. And his point was that technology will never ever replace good teachers. Teachers will always be needed and always be here, but their roles will slightly change. Their roles will become more of a coach and supporter for more independent, self-paced learning of the student using their technology device. That's what's going to change. So teachers have to change, not be replaced, but change. And if they can't change, technology will take over, for sure. Even today in many countries, by the way, the students probably are learning more from their technology than they are from their teacher in their school. Realistically, they do. And so I'm never saying that we don't need teachers. I think the teachers' roles need to change, and we will never ever replace good teachers. That's what I would support. I support the Australian teachers' point of view. So teachers are very important. They're always going to be needed, but we need to be able to support them to change. Now, on the question of assessment and testing, I think you're always going to need to assess your students for sure, because otherwise you won't have the data to know how they're performing.
Thank you very much for your very cogent presentation. One of the areas you mentioned was mindset. In my country, people who do degree courses online are not taken very seriously, even when it comes to employment. What strategy can we use to change that type of mindset so that people can perceive online degrees as having the same value in terms of content and in terms of effectiveness, like the traditional system?
Well, the simple answer is really all around what I call high-stakes certification. So you have to prove through the examination that the student that's taking the exam is the student that say who they are. And certainly, when we do all our testing for our certificates, we use high-stakes testing. the students have to go into a testing center. We have them all across Africa to validate that they are who they are. And by the way, we also license universities to be testing centers. So you have to do high-stakes testing, and I think if you have that, then that's a better way of doing it rather than just pure assessment online. High-stakes testing, good curriculum, and the brand of the institution, of course, is important.
Yeah, please, thank you. Gender balance. My name is Elizabeth Tamajo. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor for the ICT University USA Cameroon campus. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a few questions. First of all, is it possible for Microsoft to partner with a private university, or you're all interested in the government? And secondly, my university, we deal mostly with promoting our children, encouraging them in critical thinking to be innovators, and also, advancing, technology. Now, most of these things are very expensive, and the lifespan, cannot go beyond 3 years. Now, I want to find out, how can Microsoft, help us, because I'm here to find out how to advance, with the technology that we are dealing in, to make sure that, the children, our students that we send out, become job creators, not trying to hang out on people. They can create their own jobs and to be self-employed. Is there any software, or is there anything that Microsoft can do to help me when I go back home to make sure that, I have something for the children to advance? And in Africa, we have a problem of internet connectivity. And so I'm here to gather a lot to go back with it. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, let's just do the internet connectivity again, because it's come up a lot, and I know it's a big issue. My response would be, hopefully my presentation will be available to everybody after this conference, but look for the slide that says good networks. They work pretty much, the person's name on that slide is working pretty much in Africa. And they will work with you, and they will work with the telcos, and they will try and establish a better solution for internet connectivity. All things cost, for sure. When it comes to university engagement from Microsoft, one thing that maybe isn't so clear is that we do a version of Microsoft Office which is free of charge to education institutions, but it only works on the cloud. So you have to have good internet access to be able to use it properly. Or you can buy a license at high discounts, and then you can deploy them as an offline version of Office so they can use them in the university. So we already do programs, and if you're a representative of a group of universities, we do, framework agreements with the universities. So we can do that too, for access to the technology. So I would say, there's no easy answer to internet connectivity. It just has to improve. There are limitations on the actual undersea pipes coming into Africa, and therefore the costs are high, but they will come down. And if you work with good networks, I think that they will come up with a pretty good solution for you. And in terms of engaging with Microsoft, come and talk to us. We want to engage with you. We can certainly do an agreement, and we can certainly then make you aware of all of the different things we do. And by the way, if you happen to be teaching universities, we actually do a teacher certificate. So if you have an undergraduate that's trying to train to be a teacher, they can take our certification of technology effectiveness as well, so they can do that. So then again, that's a high-stakes test that they need to take to get the accreditation.
Thank you very much. I see Alberto is at the edge of the auditorium there, and I'm sure we'll be happy to take any questions, as we didn't have much time, or for Hugh as well. But and again, yes, absolutely right on the gender balance. Let's make sure that we do have a mix of questioners. Can I see any?
Morning, colleagues. I'm T.W. Mkunu from South Africa, at the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Mine is not a question. It's an input to Microsoft. I am aware of your education framework, but the challenge that education is facing, especially on the teacher's side. Remember, we cannot rely on procuring content, digital content from outside. So I would propose that on your framework, if possible, you can put together a platform then teachers can use to develop their own interactive content, because the content that is available outside there, most of it, it's videos, it's PDFs, and you name it. But the challenge is on visual labs or on interactive content, which will capture the interest of learners in the classroom. That will be my submission on my input on your framework, because I'm aware of it, but I did not find out or point out that on your framework.
Okay, great. Well, let me just say it was a very good question, that. There is a new tool. If you go up, you can actually see it, which enables you to create content as a teacher inside Microsoft Office. What we did some research and we found that teachers don't want to have to learn new content creation tools. They can do it inside Office. So as long as you've got the latest version of Office, you can actually use that now to create content. The other key thing is we have an Educator Network. I think last time I checked, it was 5 million teachers around the world on it, which are all sharing content amongst each other. So you don't even have to rely upon domestic content for teaching. You can go up there and actually take it from other teachers who have developed it around the world, and you could post your own content if you wanted to. So there is an Educator Network. Come to our booth and we'll give you the details of that so your teachers can join. And specifically in South Africa, what we're now doing is we have our internship program just about to start running. So we're now going to start to train teachers ourselves. They're going to come to Microsoft. They will learn all of the tools they have to integrate technology into the curriculum. And then we send them out to schools. And this is an ongoing program we'll do because we realize we really need change agents. Just training teachers and expect that they will remember what they've been taught in one day is not the way to go. We have to have systemic change, and we've built a program just for that.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for all of your questions. And we'll be ready to go in just a couple of minutes. Thank you all very much.